You knew that it was coming as soon as it turned out that the shooter in Sutherland Springs was a white guy. You knew where the conversation was gonna go. It only took a little bit of time, and then Donald Trump brought it there. Let's watch.
I think that mental health is your problem here. This was a very, based on preliminary reports, very deranged individual, a lot of problems over a long period of time. We have a lot of mental health problems in our country, as do other countries. But this isn't a guns situation. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little bit soon to go into it. But fortunately, somebody else had a gun that was shooting in the opposite direction. Otherwise, it would have been as bad as it was. It would have been much worse. But this is a mental health problem at the highest level. It's a very, very sad event. These are great people and a very, very sad event. But that's the way I view it.
Every single one of you could have scripted that out as soon as you saw the details about the shooting. It's not a guns thing, it's a mental health thing. It's always a mental health thing here. And the guns, let's just slow down a little bit. That same guy that you just saw in that video was talking about banning travel from the Middle East so fast that his advisors hadn't yet clued him into the idea that Uzbekistan isn't in the Middle East at that point. And then he wanted to shut down the entire diversity visa lottery program that night. Okay, but this is the dude who let's not go crazy. Let's not go crazy. I mean, this is just the worst year for mass shootings in US history, but let's not go crazy.
And you can say, well, it doesn't really matter what Trump says, and certainly he says a lot of stuff where you really hope it doesn't matter. But here, because we are looking for, he could make a real name for himself here in a good way. I mean, this is a guy who is just he's an abomination, right? But he could really do something. He said, yeah, we really have to examine this, and I'm going to call on congressional leadership. But he's wedded to the talking points. As John says, he knows what he has to say, and so he says it. And he gets into this mental health jam, and yet the truth is, the mental health thing wouldn't have kept this guy out of owning a gun in Texas.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. This is actually an opportunity for him. I mean, like with all of the other interests, the big financial interests and all that he's tied in with, he doesn't need the NRA. And if he were to do something, he would at least make it give me a moment of pause, like, oh my God, this dude banned these guns again? Like, oh, that would actually be a point in his favor. Maybe he's reasonable. He could try to do that, and you might say, well, his base would abandon him. And I think that prior to Trump, that's possible. Man, they love their guns, but they now believe that this is their dear leader. If he told them that assault weapons were bad, they'd be throwing them on a pile to burn the next day.
That's exactly right.
Use your cult for good for once.
Yes, it's that cult of personality, and John is right. He could sell a glass of water to a drowning man, this guy, when that drowning man is one of his base, and it's true. And without even having to actually craft legislation, because of course he's on to the next thing, next photo op, but even just some empty rhetoric from Trump that wasn't off those NRA talking points would have been welcome. And by the way, I want to clarify something. When I talk about the mental health thing in relation to the shooter in Texas, what I'm talking about is his domestic violence, his dishonorable discharge. None of that would have put him in a category of being in a mental health situation that wouldn't still have allowed him to buy a gun. I just want to be clear about that. So you can get away with a lot before they can consider you mentally ill to the point that they won't allow you to buy a gun in Texas.
That's true. And look, we've been through this enough times. We know that bringing up the mental health thing is just a distraction to try to get you to not push for any actual change in the wake of a tragedy. There's no reason why we need to treat it seriously, this idea, but let's treat it seriously anyway, because we like to do that. If it is a mental health problem in this country, and you keep saying that over and over again, then why did this happen? Bring up this graphic. Why did earlier this year Trump sign a bill revoking Obama-era gun checks for people with mental illnesses? Like, we're not even at a point where I'm trying to get you to do something about the mental illness that you think is the problem. I'm trying to get you to stop taking away the little that we've done previously. You're moving in the wrong direction, Trump, if we are to believe that you're actually being honest, which we know probably isn't the case. That rule, by the way, if you don't remember this incident, added people receiving Social Security checks for mental illnesses and people deemed unfit to handle their own financial affairs to the National Background Check Database. Now look, there's legitimate concerns over how exactly that would be used and who might fall under it. I understand that safeguards need to be in place, but that was like the one little step we took in the right direction. And he took that away. So don't give me any of that mental health problems. I'm not going to go into dangerous territory there. I feel like if mental health is really the problem here, it's us, it's all of us as a country. We are fucked up in some particular way that stops us from protecting our own lives.
We've just become wedded to these ideals and so wedded that there's a whole, and it's a substantial segment of the population that is falling in line with the talking points of the NRA. Yeah. And they have bought this sort of constitutional patriotism, which has been perverted. I mean, it's sort of like the Bible, where you think, well, I guess there's some good stuff in there, and the best thing about the Bible is that I can reshape it and, pop out a quote to justify anything I want. And that's the same thing that's happened with the constitutional rights on guns. And so, as we sit here with these guns that never could have been foreseen by the founding fathers, I mean, even if you accept the Constitution as a document that's not living and breathing, and of course it is a document that's living and breathing, that's why it's amended and changed and modified, you still have trouble squaring the document with what's going on now and the kinds of weapons that people are toting around.
Exactly, and again, like I know a lot of conservatives across the country, like people who are they feel like they're being fair, and they feel like, well, what could it be? It's got to be the mental health. Okay, if it was mental health, if the guns are irrelevant, and it's just crazy people that would have done it anyway, then where are all of Britain's crazy people? And where are all the crazy people in Israel? And why is it that Europe is so goddamn free of crazy people? Why is it that you only seem to go crazy in America for some reason in a way that ends up with dozens of people being killed? That's weird. We should look into that at some point as a country. Isn't that bizarre that we're the only people that go crazy around the world? Maybe it's in our water. Maybe it's the stuff that's turning all the frogs gay. Maybe it also makes us go crazy. I don't know. I'll look into it.
Yeah, if you look at the formula, it's clear that the one variable in the formula is the ownership of guns. And look, you can be for the ownership of guns, for a personal weapon, for protection of your home or whatever, but you've got to concede that these automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons that are then converted to effectively be automatic weapons, you've got to concede that they're not needed, even to defend your home. I mean, I don't know what your home looks like, but when do you need to spray the whole place with 200 bullets? You just don't need to do it. It makes no sense. These things just don't square with the facts.
Yeah, and look, people who take home defense seriously know that you would never use something like an AR for home defense anyway, because the penetration means that it's likely to go through the walls of a house and kill either members of your family or innocent bystanders. That's why you use lower caliber weapons, things like shotguns possibly, because it's literally safer for your family in a home defense situation. Similar issues for hunting. Like it's just BS. We all know, okay? You like them because they're cool. And I'll even grant you that. Like I probably am more interested in guns than anyone else in this building. I think they're cool too, but I don't need to own one. And just admit it. It's because they're awesome, and understand the consequences of you feeling that they're awesome. Is that you think that it's okay for 30 or 40 or 50 people to routinely be gunned down because you want to be able to go and think that that's cool, and that's fine. Maybe we're just living, what a sick fucking country we live in. But I think lots of stuff is cool. I don't kill people for it, and me having access to it doesn't necessitate that other people need to die.
And the other people part of that, and this is where the shoe can pinch for everybody, it's not always the other people. You can end up, these people are at a church in Texas, probably a lot of them support gun owners' rights in that community. You can end up being a victim of it. All of us can end up being victims of this stuff. When you walk into a public place now in America, and you're going, where are the exits, just in case? I know it's taken away our innocence, and as John says, it makes absolutely no sense. It is just this, hey man, isn't this cool? I've got a gun. That's why you see people on Facebook with guns. That's why the video of people shooting with guns. It's this aura around gun ownership, or having a gun, or using a gun. But the truth is, there is no inoculation from gun violence. You can become a victim, even as you support this constitutional right to own an AR.
Yeah, and the final point I'll make on this is something we were talking about in the wake of the New York attack, where very often we need to find out what sort of attack it was so that we know exactly what the narrative coming out of it is. And we said after New York, there's something we can do that would help with both cases. When it's a crazy gun lover who looks much more like me than he does like Osama bin Laden, or if it's somebody who is pledged to ISIS, if we invest in some sort of effort here in America to try to detect and to stop radicalization of all kinds, that will help with all sorts of attacks. And not only is Trump not doing that, something that would be so easy to do and would be greeted with applause from liberals and conservatives, but he defunded the few organizations in this country that were doing that. He took away the grants to non-governmental organizations that were trying to stop people from being radicalized. Not only are we not doing anything to protect ourselves, but we are literally disarming ourselves against some of the highest profile threats that we've seen since Trump became president.
But quickly a note, these mass shootings that we're talking about probably have nothing to do with radicalization of any kind. These are deranged people, result of domestic dispute, angry at my girlfriend, wife, fill in the blank. We still don't really know what produced the Las Vegas anger and all of that carnage. So
that's true.
These are people who weren't even radicalized. This has nothing to do with Islam or religion, at least best as we can see. I mean, the only religious part of this latest carnage is that it happened in a church. So
well, we'll see. We'll have to see.
I think you identify, right, it's early in the process, but I think you identify something very important, which is, honestly, it all comes back down to we're awash in these weapons and bad shit happens.
If you like this clip of the Young Turks, there's a whole live 2-hour show, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day, and you can download it or stream it and watch it without ads if you become a member. tytnetwork.com/join.